Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com. This is Disconnect to Connect One Word Conversations. One Word Conversations is brought to you by I Am William Brown, a place where you can be yourself and live your life. You know, I have conversations there through my coaching and speeches and workshops and all that other kind of stuff that I do. And I also write a couple books, and I have the U cards and the U journal. And so I bring the U cards into this conversation to kind of set the intentions. So it kind of lets you know, or lets me know how I'm going to show up within this conversation. So the U cards that I've picked for this conversation is I am unique. That is good. You are seen. And the quote card is, I think you should just do it. So, so that is terrifying sometimes when I get that card, but it's like, okay, what do I have cooking? But within that, I will introduce our word that we are going to be having this week, which is community. And so community shows up in a lot of different ways. And so I'm interested to see how community will show up within this conversation. So with that in mind, I will bring in my guests and we will have a conversation. Good morning.
Yes, good morning where you are. It's evening where I am.
Oh, okay.
I live in Europe. I'm not originally from here, but I do live in Europe.
Yeah, you know what? It is. I am so honored to have friends from all over the world, and sometimes I forget that, right? So thank you for being with me this evening, right? Or your evening. This is the moment where I give my guests an opportunity to introduce themselves however it feels comfortable to them.
Awesome. So I'm Grace Rachmany. I am living in Slovenia, as you can see in the background. I have some children. I'm a revolutionary. I work in the area of new forms of currency, new forms of computing in the Web3 or blockchain world, and really thinking about what the future economy might look like. Well, the future is looking pretty close right now. Like, how can we transition to something that's more just, both from a democracy perspective and an economy perspective? So that's what I do.
Wow, that's great. I think we need to talk. No, I'm saying no. It's great. So, how does the word community show up for you?
It's interesting. Recently, I had somebody in one of the groups that I'm involved in say that community is one of the most overused words and is frequently used for things that aren't really a community. And I really gave that some thought, like, what is community? Like, why did he say that? Because we say that. It's like, oh, you're in my whatever community, right? Like, we've both done Tony Robbins. So there's this idea, maybe there's a Tony Robbins community. And that's not a community. Like, that's a community in which you get this email sometimes that says, as a valued member of our community, we'd like to let you know about this opportunity, right? Like, I'm not sure that's what I expect from my community.
Right.
And I did raise my children in community. I was very intentional about it. And my synagogue was a community and also had a community of women. And what that means is one of my friends was ill. She had cancer. And there was a schedule online of who was going over there when, who was taking her to chemotherapy, who was sitting with her, who had to bring over some food, who had for months and months on end. Like, that's community, right?
Right.
They weren't telling me about some opportunity for them to upsell me things.
Right.
Wow. It's who takes care of you when you're sick, and then you know who your community really is.
Right. Yeah. There's that level of support and nurturing and being there. I totally get it. So I can totally understand where he said, yeah, that's not community, right? We're kind of, labeling it as to kind of make it feel better, right? There, I had a conversation, within this word, and and was mentioned that there's a community by default. It's like the community that we have with the people that we went to school with, right? That, our class, right? Our family, our Facebook community, type of thing. But in some cases, those default communities are really not communities, because there's a default in our behavior, and not our relationship too. There are some, when I look at my classmates from high school, there are a number of people that I can remember that I never want to see again, right? Not even on my Facebook feed, type of thing. And it's like, am I in community with them? And it's like, no, right?
No.
But they may feel that there is some community because we went to school together and because we are in the same grade and all that other kind of stuff. So there is this feeling of how we care for, how we relate to the people, to people in general, makes our community.
Yes, well, I mean, I think that's a great statement, and it's certainly true that, look, community, it's not an accident that most people in the United States don't have an experience of community, really. And it's not an accident that I don't live there and that I transplanted myself and wanted to raise my children in a country where there is a sense of community. I raised my children in Israel, and now that's gotten very commercialized. And now I live in Slovenia, where there is a sense of community. And again, we were going through this COVID virus, and I was walking in the park with my friends, because you were allowed to meet outside at that point. And I was saying, I'm worried because I don't really have anybody here, and everybody else has like a family farm. He's like, oh, we got room on our farm for you. Don't worry.
Right. Great. Wow.
Like, it was springtime when this hit, and everybody here planted more food and went out to their parents' place and worked on the farms. That's what people did. Right. And it's really a sense of, this is a survival community. But one of the things that's very interesting is this is when I moved to Israel, it was more socialist. And now this is also, although it's part of the European Union, the not far away history, it was part of Yugoslavia. And in these in these groups, there was a feeling of, all for one, one for all, and that you don't worry if, like you don't let, my landlady called me up and she's like, don't worry if you can't pay the rent at this time. Like, that was her first statement. Like, that's crazy. She barely knows me. I've only met her twice.
Right.
But wow. That's the sense, right? And one of the things that happens in a growth economy, if you have an economy where your GDP is the only thing you measure and you always have to grow it, and everybo's got enough, right? Everybody's got enough food. Right. So you kind of got to take stuff away from them and make them pay for it in order to grow the economy. Right. So if you take community away from people and then you got to pay for membership, now you've grown the economy. People used to babysit each other's kids for free and hang out, after school in the street. Like you and I remember that, like kickball in the street, right?
Right, absolutely.
Now you got to pay for that.
Right, right. I ain't watching your kids, right?
That's economic growth. We didn't. We just had a soccer ball, man. That's all we had. We didn't pay membership, and every day, right? You and I. I'm sure you grew up around. We're about the same generation, right?
Right. Right. Wow. Right. Yeah. I think it's so interesting that it's like now when you offer to do that in the States, in some of the areas that I've lived, it's like, it's odd, right? It's like, what do you mean, that my kids can just come and hang out, type of, what do you got running there, right? It's like, I mean, there is this disconnect from community. Right. Wow. Yeah, just show up in your house, open a refrigerator, right? It's like, what we got? What's for dinner? It's like, now, hey, I'm going to call your mom, right? Or something.
Let me set it up in my appointment calendar. Yeah.
Right.
And that is not a coincidence at all. Money is almost anti-community.
Wow.
Anti-relationship, right? Like, you don't ask your mom for the bill at the end of dinner.
Right. Right. Wow. Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I don't think that's unintentional. And if we see what's happening with the violence in the United States right now, this absolute deterioration community has allowed people to be at each other's throats, and allowed this kind of militia and allow this kind of, I mean, I can't imagine the Israeli army taking up arms against their own citizens. Probably
Right.
that's because my son's in the army.
Right. Wow.
And
Yeah,
same
wow.
here. Like,
Wow.
would you hurt your own citizens in a country of 2 million people? Like,
Wow.
you wouldn't do that. Somebody's going to be your cousin and get pissed off at you. Like, your
Right.
mom will talk to you later.
Right. It's like, you did what? Right. And there's just
You beat
no.
up, you beat up Bill? What were
Right.
you doing? What were you
Right.
thinking?
Right. Wow. And wow, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how money and the economy is working against us really being connected and being in community with each other.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. And if this conversation, for example, if one of us was paying for this, it would be different, right? If I were paying you to get to talk to your audience, like,
Right.
who would want to listen? Right.
Right.
And if you
Wow.
were paying me to, whatever, get the word out or whatever, then that would mean I have some following that you're trying to pay me for. It would totally distort our relationship. It wouldn't just be a nice, fun conversation. There'd be some like thing in the background.
Wow. Yeah, you're real. It's like look. I'm like the host, the labeled host, and it's just like, okay, you have to stay in this conversation here, and this is just blowing my mind, because I just think that sometimes when I'm not in community with people, right, it's because of I'm too connected to emotional baggage, and all that other kind of stuff, and all that kind of stuff. Nowhere in my being did I think that the economy, right, how my relationship with money, and being paid or not being paid, and the costs and we place value in a lot of our interactions, that is like limiting how we're showing up in community, in relationship for each other. That is just blowing my mind. Right.
It's actually anti-value. And that's
Wow.
if you think about what you really value. I mean, you're a very warm, loving person. You value community. You've been, married to the same person for all this time. Like, you're really, like, those are your values.
Right.
And you can't buy that with money. That's not
Right.
what we value. Like, and I don't know about you, but I'm really into air. Like, I value air.
Right.
And our extractive form of money is polluting the air I'm breathing.
Right.
Like, how
Wow.
is that? Like, that's not an externality, that's in my lungs, So,
Right. Wow.
And one of the things I did because of COVID was I started giving a workshop on these topics, right? On, what is value? Like, what is value, and what's the difference between this and that? And I did it on a pay what you can basis.
Right.
Just pay, there's a suggested price, but pay what you can. And I got much more reach. And I have people from India, and people from Hong Kong, and people from Malaysia, and people from Japan, and people from all over the world, including places where they could never afford this thing. The people from Malaysia, they paid me a fair price in their country, which was not what, right? Not the normal, but it increased my power, and it increased the sense of community around it. Like, I actually created community by not charging for it and not trying to upsell. And then people said, hey, let's do a conference together. Let's do this together. Let's do that together. Just because it was like, this is not about money. And I'm transparent. I showed them how many hours I put into it. Like, it was ridiculous. Like, it was something like, $5 an hour or something. It ended up for the amount of time I'd invested, but it's fun, and it's creating value for people all over the world. It's creating this sense that we are a one world community.
Right. Wow.
And one of the women said, I don't have money. I'd love to cook for you, but we can't do that across the world. How do I do that? So I have a tip jar where you can, like, buy me Uber Eats or whatever, but
Great.
But it's not the same.
Wow. That's right. Wow. It's really, how can we create community? This is, like I said, hot off the presses. Translation means something just came to my mind, and I'm going to talk about it before I have any understanding of it, right? Like, but it is really, really looking at my community, looking at um, my relationships, and what is getting in the way of that. Ah, gosh, I just, like I said, I was so busy. Like I said, we stop at, I'll speak for myself. I stop at my emotions. I stop at how they're showing up. I don't look at, is there anything else that can be getting in the way from us really showing up for each other? And that is, I think that is it. You have given me something to consider or to have inquiry, and that even within this conversation, and people say, I just did recently my 100th episode, and to celebrate that and kind of do that, and it's like you have all this you have all this content that you need to monetize, and you need to kind of do. It's like, crap, now I have to like worry about that, and you're leaving money on the table and all that other kind of stuff. It's like, I'm enjoying this. I don't want to. There's a part of me that's like, okay, I get this, that I am spending time and all that other kind of stuff. However, I don't want to have the economy of this get in the way of me having these type of conversations that bring me life, that really causes me to connect to someone that I haven't talked to in a year or so, that I've been connected to, that I enjoyed the last time that we talked. But it's like, hey, let's just have a conversation and really recognize that there is a connection, and that sharing this, if there was this economy a part of it, it would taint it, or it would cause you know one of us to be in pause of it, to what do I have now, if my relationship for sale, there is
You see that in the journalism all the time, right? They're trying to get you to say a certain thing that's going to sell headlines.
Right.
It's not about having a conversation or a relationship. It's about, can I get that, little clip that's going to pull people in.
Right. There's a friend of mine that I was going to mention, and he's going to be on my show, and we're going to talk, but and I've told him this before, but he does some work about relationships and co-creation and all that other kind of stuff. But one of his books is relationship economics. And when I first talked to him, I was like, dude, I like you, but that like sucks, man. I mean, that's just, there's just a part of me that it's just like, that just doesn't feel right. Right. Type of thing. And I think the way that he kind of unpacks it and talks about, and it kind of makes sense, but just the fact that there is economics involved, connected to relationship, it just doesn't feel right. And I think it's what you were saying. It's like, it kind of gets in the way of community relationships and all that other kind of stuff, when there is this value. When I say that my time with you, my conversations with you, has a value or doesn't, right?
And there's a number associated.
Right. There's a number.
This one is worth more or less than that one.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And it's not just like you said, we have room for you at our farm, right? We just got, we'll make it work. Don't worry about it. Right.
We'll eat a little less sauerkraut this year, like whatever it is,
Yeah. And it's like, we are missing opportunities to really connect to people, be in community with people on a level that will make a difference. Wow.
And we all know someone, at least one someone, who's in a relationship they don't want to be in because they can't afford to leave.
Right.
I mean, I know somebody who got a divorce and had to live with his folks for like 4 years because the divorce agreement was so bad in his wife's favor. And she was an attorney. And I was
Right.
like, she can make her own living. And he was literally living with his parents for like 5 years just to pay
Mm.
back whatever this, child support and alimony. And I'm like, what example are you setting for your children that, the woman is dependent on the man's income and
Right.
that the woman would take advantage of the man that way? And what example are you setting for your son? Like that's, what are you setting him up for worrying about in the future? Like really bad setup, right? And that's
Right.
again, like forget about community. That's your family, right?
Right.
That should be the first people. And really your family. I mean, I like I had some problem with my apartment when I was traveling, and my ex-husband went over there and fixed it because I was overseas.
Mm.
Like that's how community or family should show up.
Right.
And like, my when I was still living in the country, I would get wedding invitations for his family's events and stuff. I mean, it's just that's your community, that's your family. Those are the people when there were, I mean, Israel had certain, political issues in certain places, and then people came and lived in each other's houses because there was bombing in this area, that area. That's community.
Right.
That's not like, hey, we've got a Facebook group.
Right. Right. It's kind of no, I really appreciate it because I had, we're at this stage of what people call empty nesters, right? Only have adult children, and there's and people are saying, oh yeah, aren't you so glad they're out of the house and all that other kind of stuff and things like that, and are you concerned about them coming back or anything like that, and kind of figuring it out. And it's like I was talking to my wife, and it's like, no, I'm not concerned at all. If any time any one of our kids, um, they're all still single, or just dating, they're not married or having any children or anything like that. But at any point in their living of their life, if living together in community is makes sense, it happens. And it's not because that, hey, you're at a certain age and you have to stay out of the nest, right? Type of thing.
Yeah.
It is this is my community, and we will always be there for each other. If we have to get a larger, we went from a larger house to a smaller house. If we have to get a larger house again to kind of do that, I'm okay with that. And the fact that we have, in some cases, created this environment that this is how we show up in community, and this is the only way, right? But, because I think it goes to, but what you're saying, it's because of value, it's because of the economy of it. Hey, if I have an adult child that is working or not working, how they're contributing to the community in some cases is irrelevant, right? It is really being there for each other. And it's like figuring it out. And there's not that stage of wondering that I am less of, right? Because, I am the parent and I need to live with my kids, right? Or something, or one of my kids or anything like that. It is the community will figure it out. And the more that we give ourselves space to be in community and to figure it out without the economy of it or the value of it, the more that we're able to stay in community. Oh, wow, that's just really, it's opened up so many things, for me to just really remind myself what is missing in my life.
Yeah.
And just because I label it a community doesn't make it a community, right? You're right.
And if we really had an economy that worked for people, we would be looking at a different measure. Like we'd be
Right.
looking like the measure I like to talk is super simple, right? Is like how many people in my town went hungry today, right?
Hmm.
Whatever I call my community. And then what if our governments measured only that? How many people within 50 kilometers of you went hungry? And that's what they measured the success of your economy by,
Hmm.
right? And
Wow.
your responsibility was to make sure that nobody within whatever it is 20 kilometers of you goes hungry. That's your job. Like
Great.
that's what's considered a productive person, is somebody who makes sure that nobody within 20 kilometers of them goes hungry. Then you'd be having town hall meetings about, okay, look, we're going to have to grow a little more grain this year, and everybody's going to have to put an extra 2 hours a week on the farm, or we're going to all have to, whatever it is, produce some more of these electronics that the guys, on the farm want for us, or we're going to have to do this and that. And if you were really a community, that would be your job. It's like, make
Right.
sure nobody goes hungry. That's
Right.
it.
Wow.
Like nothing else. Make sure nobody goes hungry and nobody dies on the street.
Right. Wow.
And
Wow. It's all of what we're measuring, right? Wow.
yeah, it's what we're
Wow.
measuring. And it's, we all think, especially people like you and me, we've done a lot of these self-help, self-development, personal development, business people. I've got an MBA and, we've business mastery. We've done tons of stuff, right?
Right.
And there's this idea that, that it's fair. There's the rules of the game, and you play the rules of the game. And if you play the right rules of the game, you're going to succeed. But
Right.
we didn't make those rules.
Hmm.
We
Right.
did not make those rules. We know who made those rules. It wasn't somebody who looked like you, and it wasn't
Right.
somebody who looked like me,
Right.
made those rules to keep themselves in money
Right.
and to
Wow.
make sure you and I never had it. And so the rules aren't fair. They're just the same rules for everybody, but they're not fair rules.
Right. Wow. Wow. I think we've just uncovered something. Well, I'm uncovering something, and we could talk about this for hours,
Yeah.
but
This is what I teach people, how to start looking at this differently. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think, and that's, that is something that I'm going to put your website up so people can reach out to you. And I need to like connect with, some of the offerings that you have, because the more that I stay in this conversation, the more that I believe that I will start measuring different things instead of just accepting these are the rules. This is what this is life. That it's like, no, I'm going to create my own rules. I'm going to measure. I'm going to take different measurements in my community, so I could show up differently and show up for my community.
Absolutely.
Is there any last thing that you want to leave everybody with, or something else came up for you?
I think what you said is perfect. Like what we're measuring for represents our values.
Hmm.
And when you create a community, what do you want to measure for? Is it, like how quickly do we help somebody who's sick? Is it, how many people in our neighborhood don't get food? Is it, whatever it is? But like whatever you're measuring for should align with what your values and what you think a community should be. What do I need from community? And
Right.
then what do I measure for?
Wow. No, Grace, that that was great. I mean, you've challenged me and inspired me to show up in community. And I
Yeah.
think that's what these conversations are all about. What am I going to disconnect from so I can connect to what's important? I've connected to my values because I was able to let go of, hey, this is what community is, and this is all it is. And it's not. It's so much more than that, because we can create that. It's not a default. It is something, it's an intentional thing. And there is this, it feels like there's this urgency that's like, hey, this is the part of the community, and I don't have to stay in something less than that. And so thank you very much for this conversation. This has been great. I will share your links and share your site, and yeah, I've learned more about community. And I am so honored to be in community with you.
And if I had a farm, you would be invited.
Right. Well, thank you. And I felt that. And it wasn't just saying it because you're
No,
thousands of miles away from me. I felt that. I felt that
no,
you're right.
you and your wife, and like it really is about being together. That's
Right.
what it's about.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. So we'll say our goodbyes from
Thank
the
you.
from later, but this has been great. Thanks. Wow. And I think our community is what we measure, right? The things that we value, where our values show up. And within that shared value, and then there's a shared measurement. And then we won't allow the economy of things to control how we take care of people. And don't just put community on it and call it a day. It's really about the support and the nurturing and the availability. Hopefully that's not a soapbox, but I'm just kind of like really just getting it for myself that this is what community means to me. I hope you found value in this conversation. I sure did. But I invite you to connect with me on IamWilliamBrown.com and just kind of schedule introductory coaching session and just see how you're showing up and how you're living your life. Because the world wants you, the world needs you, and the world is waiting for you. So go be you. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.